The wind howled like a banshee, clawing at the wooden stilts of my fire tower. Rain lashed against the glass windows, blurring the already fading sunset into an indistinct smear of orange and gray. I shivered, pulling my wool blanket tighter around me. This early autumn storm was unexpected, a brutal reminder that the wilderness didn't care about schedules or comfort. It just was. I was alone, miles from any other human being, perched on the edge of the world in my little wooden box, responsible for spotting the first flicker of disaster in the vast, darkening forest below. Night deepened, and the storm intensified. The radio crackled with static, occasionally spitting out garbled weather reports before succumbing to the atmospheric onslaught. I tried to distract myself, reading through dog-eared paperbacks and brewing weak coffee on my propane stove. But a gnawing unease settled in my stomach, a feeling I couldn't shake off. It wasn't just the storm, it was something else, something creeping at the edge of my awareness. It started subtly, a brief, indistinct shadow in the periphery as lightning illuminated a nearby ridge. Then, a low, guttural sound that was almost lost in the wind's roar, but resonated deep within my bones. I told myself it was just a bear, a mountain lion, some harmless creature seeking shelter from the storm. But the primal fear that gripped me refused to be rationalized away. I scanned the forest below with my binoculars, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the rain and darkness. Nothing. Just swaying trees and the relentless downpour. But the feeling persisted, a sense of being watched, of something large and unseen moving just beyond the range of my vision. Then, I saw it. A pair of eyes, glowing with an unnatural intensity, reflecting back my flashlight beam from the base of a towering pine. They were too big, too far apart to belong to any animal I knew. They burned with an intelligence that was both terrifying and alien. For a moment, we were locked in a silent, unwavering stare. Then, the creature blinked, and the eyes vanished into the darkness. My heart hammered against my ribs. Fear lent me a strange clarity. I locked the tower door, barricaded the windows with my meager furniture. I knew it wouldn't hold against something determined to get in, but it was all I had. I grabbed my axe, its weight a small comfort in my trembling hands. Hours crawled by. The storm raged, a constant cacophony that masked any other sounds. I stayed glued to the windows, my eyes scanning the woods. Every creak of the tower, every rustle of leaves, sent a jolt of terror through me. I saw nothing, but I knew it was still out there, circling, watching. Then, the scratching started. A slow, deliberate scraping against the wooden supports of the tower, low near the ground. It circled the tower, the scratching growing louder, more insistent with each pass. Whatever it was testing the structure, probing for weaknesses. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my throat. The scratching stopped directly beneath me. I could feel its presence, hear its heavy breathing. The floorboards vibrated subtly. I knew it was only a matter of time before it found a way in. Suddenly, there was a deafening crash as the door splintered inward. Wood exploded inwards and the door was torn from its hinges. I screamed and stumbled backwards into the far corner of the tower. I raised my axe in front of me, shaking. Its eyes were just as I remembered them, glowing with an almost sinister intelligence, but the darkness around them obscured everything else. I screamed and swung. I awoke on the floor of the tower the next morning. Sunlight pierced through the shattered door, illuminating splintered wood and shredded blankets. The storm had passed. Everything was silent except for the birds that had returned to the forest. I couldn't remember what happened after my scream. I found the axe, covered in something that was neither blood nor fur. I quit my job that day. I hope for my sake that what I saw was just a dream. The radio crackled, spitting static into the quiet hum of my mountaintop perch. Tower 7, this is command, do you copy? Tower 7, copy clear, command, I replied, pushing the talk button. The wind howled around the small, wooden tower, a constant companion in my summer solitude. We've got a possible smoke report, Sector 4. Civilian report says a faint plume rising just beyond the ridge. Can you confirm? Sector 4. Just beyond the old growth forest. Prime tinderbox. Roger that, Command. I'll get my binoculars on it. I scanned the horizon through my lenses. The haze of the late afternoon sun played tricks on the eye, but there, just beyond the thick canopy, a wisp of gray clawed at the sky. Not the lazy, billowing cloud of a controlled burn, but a tight, concentrated column. Definitely a fire. Confirmed, Command. Visible smoke plume, Sector 4. Requesting authorization to investigate on foot. Authorization granted, Tower 7. Exercise extreme caution. We're short-staffed. Stay in contact. Copy that, Command. Tower 7 out. My gut churned with a nervous energy. Not just the fire, something felt wrong. The air held a heavy, oppressive stillness that silenced even the birds. I grabbed my pack, filled with water, a first aid kit, and a sturdy hatchet, and started the long trek down the mountain. The forest floor was thick with pine needles, muffling my footsteps. The scent of damp earth and resin usually soothed me, but today it felt cloying, almost suffocating. The closer I got to Sector 4, the stronger the smell became, mixed with something else, something acrid and unsettling. As I crested the ridge, the smell hit me full force. It was the unmistakable stench of burning flesh. My hand instinctively flew to the hatchet, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. This wasn't a wildfire. This was something else. Cautiously, I crept through the trees, the smoke now stinging my eyes. I flattened myself behind a massive redwood, peering through the branches. The sight that greeted me made my blood run cold. In a small clearing, a bonfire blazed, fed by thick logs. Around it, robed figures chanted in a guttural tongue I didn't recognize. Their faces were hidden in shadow, but I saw the glint of metal in their hands. And piled around the fire, like discarded firewood, were bodies. Human bodies. Some were stripped bare, others still wore jeans and t-shirts, the everyday clothes of hikers and campers. The air crackled with the heat of the flames and the horrifying sizzle of burning flesh. They were burning people alive. Or, maybe they already were dead. But from the looks of it, they had been for a while. Terror threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced myself to stay calm, to observe. I needed information. I noticed one figure, taller than the rest, seemingly leading the ritual. He was dressed in a crimson robe, a silver mask obscuring his face. In his hand, he held a long, curved knife. He raised the knife, the blade reflecting the firelight, and the chanting intensified. He pointed the knife toward one of the bodies and then brought it down in a swift, sickening motion. The chanting reached a frenzied crescendo. I didn't need to see what he did to understand. This wasn't just murder. It was a ritual. A sacrifice. My breath hitched in my throat. I knew I had to get out of there, to report this to the authorities. But as I slowly began to back away, a twig snapped under my boot. The chanting stopped. The crimson-robed figure turned, his masked face scanning the trees. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't see me. But then, one of the other robed figures pointed directly at my hiding place. There. He's here. He sees. Panic exploded in my chest. I didn't waste another second. I turned and ran, the hatchet heavy in my hand. The cultists screamed, their voices a horrifying blend of rage and triumph. I could hear them crashing through the undergrowth behind me, their chanting replaced by the sound of pursuit. I ran as fast as I could, my lungs burning, my legs screaming in protest. I knew the trail better than they did, but they were many, and I was just one man. I burst out of the trees and onto a narrow, rocky path. I risked a glance over my shoulder. They were closing in, their robes flapping in the wind, their faces now visible. Their eyes burned with a fanatical light. I knew I couldn't outrun them forever. I had to make a stand. I stopped, turned, and raised my hatchet. My heart pounded in my chest, but I stood my ground, ready to fight for my life, ready to defend the sanctity of this park, ready to stop these monsters from defiling this sacred land. The cultists surged forward, their knives glinting in the fading light. The crimson-robed figure raised his hand, silencing them. "You cannot escape us," he said, his voice a raspy whisper. "You have witnessed our sacred rite. You are now part of it." My grip tightened on the hatchet. "You're insane," I spat. He chuckled, a chilling sound that echoed through the trees. "Insane? No. We are enlightened. We are bringing balance to the world. And you, my friend, will help us achieve it." He gestured, and the cultists lunged. I roared and swung the hatchet, the steel cleaving the air. The fight was on, a desperate struggle for survival against a force of darkness I never knew existed in the heart of this beautiful, unsuspecting national park. I just hoped someone would find me, or what was left of me, before it was too late. The wind howled a mournful song around my fire tower, rattling the windows in their frames. Another typical Tuesday, 60 feet above the endless green of Sequoia National Park. My name's Ben, and for the last 5 years, I've been the solitary sentinel of this patch of wilderness, watching for the telltale plume of smoke that could spell disaster. Solitude becomes a strange companion out here. You start talking to yourself, naming the squirrels, and imagining conversations with the trees. This particular Tuesday, however, was about to become anything but typical. It started with the tremor. A low, guttural vibration that resonated through the wooden supports of the tower. I froze, listening. Earthquakes aren't uncommon here, but this felt different, deeper, almost biological. Then, one of my water jugs vibrated off the counter and shattered. Okay, definitely not normal. I grabbed my radio, ready to report whatever the hell was going on, when I noticed something else. A hairline crack, spiderwebbing across the concrete foundation of the tower. It wasn't there yesterday. It was definitely not there yesterday. Curiosity, that age-old curse, gnawed at me. I geared up, donned my boots, grabbed my axe and a heavy-duty flashlight. Descending the winding staircase, I felt the tremor again, weaker this time. The crack was wider at ground level, a black, jagged grin in the concrete. I circled the tower, my flashlight beam cutting through the encroaching twilight. That's when I saw it. A section of earth, seemingly untouched yesterday, had crumbled in, revealing a gaping hole, dark and forbidding. It was easily big enough for a person to squeeze through. My rational brain screamed at me to call it in, to report it, to stay the hell away. But that damn curiosity, it won. Taking a deep breath, I gripped my axe tighter and slid down the loose dirt into the darkness. The air immediately dropped 10 degrees, thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something acrid and indefinable. The beam of my flashlight struggled to penetrate the oppressive gloom. I found myself in a narrow passage, the walls slick with moisture. As I moved deeper, the passage widened into a vast cavern. The scale was breathtaking. Stalactites hung like frozen tears from the ceiling, and stalagmites rose from the floor like grotesque fingers. That's when I saw the bones. Scattered amongst the rocks, bleached white by the damp air, were human bones. Rib cages, skulls, femurs, enough to make my stomach churn. What the hell was this place? Then, a sound. A low, guttural growl that echoed through the cavern. My blood ran cold. I swung my flashlight around, my heart hammering against my ribs. And then I saw them. They were huddled in the shadows, barely visible, their skin pale and translucent, their eyes large and black, reflecting my flashlight beam like a predator's. There were maybe a dozen of them, men, women, and children, all naked, all staring at me with an unsettling intensity. They looked human, but somehow twisted, corrupted by generations of living in the dark. One of them, a large male with matted, greasy hair, stepped forward. He grunted, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. He pointed at me, then at his mouth. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Cannibals. I raised my axe, a pathetic gesture against their numbers, but it was all I had. Stay back. I yelled, my voice trembling. They didn't understand English. They didn't understand anything but hunger. The male grunted again, then charged. The others followed, emerging from the shadows, their eyes gleaming with a terrifying hunger. I fought. I swung my axe, connecting with the male's shoulder, drawing a shriek of pain. But they kept coming, driven by a primal instinct I couldn't comprehend. I managed to keep them at bay for a while, but I was outnumbered, outmatched, and terrified. I fell back, scrambling over the rocky ground, trying to find a way out. My flashlight beam danced frantically, illuminating the horror of my situation. I was trapped. Then, I saw it. A narrow passage branching off from the main cavern. A chance. I sprinted towards it, the cannibals hot on my heels. I squeezed through the passage, the rough rock scraping against my skin. The passage was tight, forcing me to crawl on my hands and knees. I could hear them behind me, their grunts and snarls echoing in the confined space. I crawled faster, driven by adrenaline and pure terror. Finally, I emerged into another cavern, smaller than the first, but with a feature that made my heart leap. A narrow shaft leading upwards, sunlight filtering down from the top. It was the original crack, widened by the earthquake. My way out. Ignoring the searing pain in my lungs, I started to climb, using the rocks as handholds. The cannibals were close behind, clawing at my legs, their fingers digging into my flesh. With a final surge of effort, I pulled myself up to the surface. I scrambled out of the hole, collapsing onto the grass, gasping for air. I didn't look back. I ran. I ran as fast as I could, away from the tower, away from the hole, away from the horrors that lurked beneath the earth. I'm back at the ranger station now, shaking, covered in dirt and blood. I've reported what I saw, but no one believes me. They think I'm suffering from altitude sickness, or cabin fever. They're sending a team to investigate, but I doubt they'll find anything. The cannibals will have retreated back into the depths, waiting for their next meal. I'm going to resign. I can't stay here. I can't live with the knowledge of what lies beneath my feet. Sequoia National Park is beautiful, but it holds a secret, a dark and terrifying secret, and I've seen too much. I'll never forget the sight of those pale, desperate faces, the sound of their guttural growls, the stench of damp earth and death. And I'll never forget the realization that humanity, in its most primal and horrifying form, still exists, hidden away in the darkness, waiting for its chance to feed.